Have you ever trusted someone so much you gave them your soul, only to realize you were just a pawn in their game? I did. And that night, when I lost everything, when my husband's friends laughed in my face, I made one call. Just one call. It changed everything, starting with putting my name on the very company he just used to destroy me. My name is Alara Vance. I'm 35 years old, and my world was supposed to be perfect. Tonight was the apex of it all. We were in the most exclusive high-rise in Austin, the air electric with the scent of expensive perfume and the low hum of deals being solidified. This was the party to celebrate Apex Innovations, my husband's company, signing a contract worth millions of dollars. But it wasn't just his company. I was the ghost in the machine, the silent partner. My family, now gone, had built a quiet empire in this city, and I had spent the last 5 years channeling every connection, every favor, every bit of credibility they had left me into Marcus Thorne. I had worked tirelessly behind the scenes, sacrificing my own ambitions so he could achieve his. I believed in him. I believed in us. Tonight, I thought, was our victory. The crystal glasses chimed. Marcus stood at the front, his custom suit fitting him like a second skin. He was radiant, a king in his new court. I watched him, my heart swelling with a naive pride. He raised his glass. "To the team," he started, his voice booming with a new, unsettling authority. "To the investors who saw the vision." The room applauded. Then, his eyes found mine across the crowd. I smiled, ready to share the moment. "And especially," he continued, a smirk playing on his lips, "I want to thank my inspiration, my wife, Alara." A pause. The room held its breath with me. "For showing me exactly what I do not want in my life." The silence that followed was not empty. It was a suffocating, crushing weight that sucked the air from my lungs. My smile froze. A grotesque mask I couldn't lower. I must have misheard. This was a joke. A terrible, cruel joke. Then, the laughter started. It began as a low snicker from the corner. Greg, his best man, and Jessica, my best friend. Their faces were alight with a shared, vicious glee. Marcus's face was cold, devoid of any warmth I had ever known. He reached into his pocket and threw a single house key onto the polished table in front of me. It skidded and stopped. Then, a thick manila envelope landed next to it. "I've had your things moved out of the house," he said, his voice as casual as if discussing the weather. "These are the divorce papers. You have 24 hours to sign." The room was spinning. I couldn't breathe. "Marcus, what are you—" Jessica, my confidant, the woman who held my hand at my father's funeral, stepped forward. She looped her arm through Marcus's, her red dress a slash of newfound arrogance. She looked down at me, her eyes pitying, yet triumphant. "Oh, Ilara, don't make that face. It's unbecoming. At least you're free now. Free to go wait tables or something. I hear that's what your degree is good for." The cruelty was so profound it was paralyzing. Then, a new horror. Greg had his phone out, the red light glowing, his camera panning from my stunned face to Marcus and Jessica's triumphant pose. "This is gold for social media. Mrs. Apex gets the boot." Laughter erupted, a wave of it, washing over me. These people, our friends, the investors I had personally courted, they were all laughing. "Security," Marcus said, snapping his fingers. 2 large men in black suits, men I recognized from the company payroll, moved toward me. They grabbed my bare arms. The fabric of my evening gown felt paper-thin and absurd. I tried to pull my wallet from my clutch to call someone, but my hands were shaking. My phone showed no service. My credit cards, as I would later learn, were already locked. My wallet was empty. They were dragging me through the party, past the smiling, mocking faces, toward the elevator. As they hauled me past my husband, he leaned in. His cologne filled my senses one last time, mixed with the stench of his betrayal. His voice was a venomous whisper, meant only for me. "Thank you for the introductions to your father's investors. By the way," he breathed into my ear, "they're all mine now." Then, the elevator doors opened, and they threw me out. The lobby doors hissed shut behind me, sealing me off from the warmth and light, leaving me in the cold Austin night with nothing but the echo of his words. I was standing on the curb, a ghost in a silk gown. The warm Austin night had turned, and a cold drizzle began to speckle the pavement, sticking strands of hair to my face. I was outside. I had nothing. My purse was designer, but the cards inside were useless plastic, and my phone was a dead brick. I stumbled to the corner, away from the golden light of the tower, and tried my personal phone again. I called my sister. Voicemail. I called 2 friends I had known since college. Voicemail. Voicemail. I knew, with a certainty that was as cold as the rain, that Marcus had already gotten to them. He had warned them. My social safety net, my entire life, had been systematically unraveled, and I was just now seeing the loose threads. "Your father's investors." His voice echoed in my head, a parting shot of venom. "They're all mine now." My father. He had been dead for 5 years. He was a quiet, almost reclusive man who saw the world in code and algorithms. Marcus had always been dismissive of his quiet nature, seeing it as weakness. I saw it as strength. I remembered a conversation just before he passed. He had called me to his study, the room smelling of old books and soldering wire. He'd handed me a device that looked like a relic from a spy movie, a heavy, dark gray satellite phone. It was bulky and utterly out of place in my modern life. "Ilara," he had said, his eyes serious, fixing mine. "Don't ever use this. Put it away and forget it. Unless you lose everything. Unless you find yourself at a point where you have nothing left to lose and you are ready to get it back. Double." I had laughed, a little uncomfortably. "Dad, what is this? Are you planning to go off the grid? Just promise me, Ilara. Keep it with you, always." I had promised. I'd always thought it was a metaphor, a dramatic gesture from a man who had trouble expressing his love in ordinary ways. I'd kept it in a hidden, silk-lined compartment at the bottom of my favorite handbag, a secret totem. Tonight, I had lost everything. My fingers, numb and shaking, fumbled with the lining of my clutch. There it was. Heavy, solid, real. I pulled it out, the dark screen lighting up with a simple, green-lit menu. It had a full battery. Of course it did. My father had thought of everything. There was only one contact, one entry in the address book, Davenport. My thumb hovered over the call button. This was it. The moment I had dismissed as fantasy. I was no longer a wife. I was no longer a partner. I was a 35-year-old woman in a wet evening gown, standing on a street corner, about to make a call to a ghost. I pressed the button. It didn't dial like a normal phone. There was a brief hiss of static, then one single clear ring. A voice answered instantly. Not a hello, but a statement. Calm, professional, and utterly awake. "Ms. Vance, I was wondering when you would call." A sob, hot and sharp, tore from my chest. It was the first sound I had made since the party. This is Ilara," I choked out, the rain now mixing with the tears. "Marcus Thorne. He took everything. Apex Innovations. The voice cut me off, not unkindly, but with the precision of a surgeon. "I know who he is, Ms. Vance, and I know precisely what Apex Innovations is. Please give me your exact location. Do not move. I will be there in 10 minutes. "Who is this?" I whispered. "My name is Julian Davenport. I was your father's attorney, and now I am yours." He hung up. 10 minutes. I stared at the blank screen, the rain now falling in earnest, plastering the expensive dress to my skin. I didn't know what to expect. A taxi, a rideshare. Exactly 10 minutes later, a car turned the corner. It wasn't a taxi. It was a Maybach, a silent, black predator that slid through the rain and stopped directly in front of me. The windows were so dark they looked like polished obsidian. The back door opened. A man in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit stepped out, holding a large black umbrella. He was tall, sharp, and looked completely unbothered by the storm or the woman collapsing in front of him. He held the umbrella over me. "Mr. Davenport." "Ms. Vance," he said, his voice the same as the one on the phone. He guided me toward the open door of the car. "Get in. We have a great deal of work to do. Your father left very specific instructions for this exact scenario." The Maybach was a silent vault, gliding through the wet, dark streets of Austin. The chaos of the party, the laughter, the glass tower, all faded behind us, feeling like a scene from someone else's life. I was still shivering, the expensive silk of my gown now cold and ruined, clinging to my skin. My reflection in the tinted window showed a woman I barely recognized, streaked mascara, hollow eyes. Julian Davenport, the man I had never met but who was apparently my savior, sat opposite me. He did not offer a blanket or a kind word. He offered something better: action. He slid a heavy, matte black tablet from his briefcase and handed it to me. "The first thing you must understand, Ms. Vance, is that your father did not trust Marcus. He never did." The words felt like a slap. "That is not true," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "My father. He liked Marcus. He helped him. He made those introductions. He set up the meetings for funding. I had been there. I had sat in those dinners. The investors from Dubai. My father arranged all of that before he passed." Davenport shook his head, a gesture that was small but absolute. "That is part one of the story. The narrative Marcus believes. The narrative he was meant to believe. Now, here is part two. Your father did not help Marcus find funding. Ms. Vance, your father was the funding." I stared at him, the tablet heavy in my lap. "I do not understand." "Your father was a brilliant strategist," Davenport continued, his voice the calm center of my swirling confusion. "He knew Marcus was charming, ambitious, and utterly ruthless, and he knew you loved him. He could not, as you asked, refuse to help. So, he helped in his own way. He created a test. He tapped a key, and the tablet screen illuminated, showing a complex flowchart of corporate structures. "Those Dubai investors," Davenport said, tapping a box labeled Gulf Horizon Holdings, a shell corporation registered in Cayman, and this one, Zenith Capital Partners, a trust based in Switzerland. They are all owned, through a dozen different layers, by one single entity." He zoomed out, and at the very top of the food chain, there was one name, the Vance Legacy Trust. "Your father," Davenport stated, "secretly financed 100% of Apex Innovations. Every dollar, every server, every lease, every salary. It was all him. It was all your inheritance, protected and disguised." The implication settled on me, heavy as stone. "Then Marcus." "Marcus Thorne is not the owner," Davenport said, confirming the impossible. "He never has been. He is a salaried employee, a chief executive officer paid a very generous wage to manage an asset he was foolish enough to believe was his." I leaned back against the leather, the air leaving my lungs. It was too much. A 5-year lie. Why, I finally breathed. Why would my father do this? It was, as I said, a test. Davenport said, "Your father wanted to know if the man you loved was worthy of you. He wanted to see what Marcus would do with power. He gave him a long rope, Ms. Vance, to see if he would build a ladder or a noose. And tonight," I said, the image of Marcus's sneer, of Jessica's hand on his arm, flashing in my mind. He failed, Davenport agreed, in a manner more spectacular and public than we could have ever anticipated. Which brings us to the mechanism of your inheritance. He swiped the screen. A new document appeared. Your father's will is unconventional. It governs the entire trust, and it contains a very specific, ironclad morality clause. My eyes scanned the legal text. A morality clause, binding upon the appointed CEO of Apex Innovations. It stipulates that the CEO must act with fidelity, not just to the company's finances, but to the primary beneficiary of the trust, you. I looked up at him. The clause, he explained, is precise. It explicitly forbids any action that would result in the public humiliation, intentional financial destabilization, or emotional distress of the beneficiary. By publicly ambushing you, by attempting to seize control of the company assets, and by conducting himself in a manner of clear and provable infidelity which we have been documenting for 6 months, Marcus has violated the clause. A new feeling was starting to burn through the cold. It was a cold, clean fury. It was power. And what, I asked, my voice suddenly very clear, happens when he violates that clause? Davenport allowed himself the smallest, most controlled smile. What happens, Ms. Vance, is that his employment is terminated, and full, undisputed control of Apex Innovations transfers immediately and irrevocably to you. We did not go to the home I had shared with Marcus. That house was his territory, and I was done retreating. Davenport took me to a secure penthouse I never knew existed, a glass-walled fortress high above the city, owned and maintained by the trust. The ruined evening gown, stiff with dried rain and humiliation, was left in a pile by the door. It was a snakeskin I was glad to shed. I did not sleep. Sleep was a luxury for those at peace, and I was at war. While the city slept, I worked. Davenport had brought me the real books. Not the sanitized, glossy reports Marcus presented at shareholder meetings, but the raw server logs, the transfer authorizations, the expense accounts. The woman Marcus had dismissed, the woman he thought was only good for picking out china patterns, was the daughter of a man who taught her to read a balance sheet before she could drive. I read, and the shock from the night before, the icy cold of despair, began to burn. It wasn't just carelessness. It was a feeding frenzy. Marcus had been systematically bleeding Apex Innovations dry. He was not just a bad husband, he was a terrible CEO. The grief for my marriage died, and a cold, pure rage took its place. This was no longer just my revenge. This was the defense of my father's legacy. He had used my father's money to build a kingdom, and then he had used that kingdom to humiliate me. As the sun rose, staining the Austin skyline in shades of pink and orange, a team arrived. They were not lawyers. They were an arsenal. A stylist, a makeup artist, and a severe-looking woman who specialized in executive presence. Mr. Davenport sent us, the stylist said. We have our instructions. I stood in front of a full-length mirror. My hair, long and flowing, was how Marcus had always insisted I wear it. It makes you look soft, Alara, he used to say. Approachable. Cut it, I told the stylist, pointing to a picture on her tablet, a sharp, asymmetrical bob that grazed the jawline. The sound of the shears was the only sound in the room. When she was finished, the woman in the mirror was someone new. Her eyes were hard, her jaw was set. The long, soft hair, his hair, lay in a dark pool on the floor. They dressed me, not in a soft dress, but in a custom-tailored pantsuit of pearl-white gabardine. It was armor. When Davenport arrived, I was drinking black coffee, studying the final set of financials. He stopped, taking in the transformation. Good, he said simply. Today, he must not see his wife. He must not see the victim from the party. He must see Alara Vance. He must see his boss. I turned from the window, the tablet in my hand. He bought Jessica a condo, I said. my voice void of emotion. A penthouse at the Four Seasons, $2.2 million, wired directly from the Apex Reserve account, disguised as a consulting fee. Davenport nodded. We have the wire transfer. And Greg, I continued, his new sports car, $50,000, listed as a travel bonus for a trip he never took. I looked at Davenport, the cold fire burning bright. I do not just want the company, Julian. I want every single cent returned. I want them to pay it all back. He handed me a leather-bound folder. This is the final step. The paperwork changing the registered agent and director on the state business license. It was electronically filed an hour ago. At precisely 9 o'clock this morning, it becomes public record. As of this moment, legally, the company is yours. He paused, a shadow of something almost like a smile touching his lips. Ah, and one final detail. That magnificent multi-million-dollar contract Marcus just signed, the one he celebrated last night, the one that solidified his position. I asked. That is the one, Davenport said. It was with us. Another, more deeply hidden, subsidiary of your father's trust. It was the final piece of the test, and we have the right to cancel it at any time, for any reason, or for no reason at all. I was in the main conference room at 8:45 in the morning. I had been there for an hour, drinking black coffee, my back to the wall of windows that overlooked the city. The long, polished mahogany table reflected my image back at me, the white suit, the sharp new haircut, the cold eyes, my father's eyes. Davenport stood by the presentation screen, his briefcase open, his demeanor as placid as a frozen lake. We were ready. We heard him before we saw him. Marcus arrived at precisely 9:30, just as his secretary, a woman I now knew had been on my father's payroll for years, had predicted. His laugh was too loud, echoing in the marble lobby. He was, as she had put it, preening. He was walking with Greg, no doubt reliving the triumph of my public execution. And then I told her, his voice boomed, getting closer. You have 24 hours. You should have seen her face. Greg. We heard his secretary, Ms. Allen, intercept him. Her voice was firm, professional, cutting through his bragging. Mr. Thorne, there is an emergency board meeting. It has been called by the primary stakeholders. They are waiting for you in the main conference room. Right now. The bragging stopped. A confused silence. What board? What stakeholders? I heard him scoff. I am the board. The door swung open. Marcus strode in, his face flushed with annoyance. Greg trailing behind him like a pilot fish. He was about to demand an explanation when he saw me. He froze. Then, he laughed. It was a short, barking sound of genuine disbelief. Alara, what in the hell are you doing here? Is this a joke? He looked around the room, as if expecting to find a hidden camera. Look, I know you are upset, but this is pathetic. The joke is over. Get out of my building. Security. He turned to the door, expecting the two men from last night to appear. They are just outside. Marcus, I said. My voice cut through the air, silencing him. It did not shake. It did not waver. And they are waiting for my orders. He turned back to me, his eyes narrowing. The humor was gone, replaced by a dark confusion. What did you just say? Davenport hit a key. The large screen behind me lit up. Mr. Thorne, he began, his voice filling the room. My name is Julian Davenport. My firm and I represent the absolute majority shareholder of Apex Innovations. Marcus's face, already ruddy, began to pale. That is impossible. I know all my investors. I was with them last night. You are not one of them. Are you referring? Davenport asked. To Gulf Horizon Holdings and Zenith Capital Partners, your investors from Dubai. You damn right I am, Marcus snapped, trying to regain his footing. And they would not call a meeting without me. They would not, Davenport agreed, as they do not technically exist. They are, and have always been shell corporations for a single entity. He clicked to the next slide. The organizational chart I had studied all night appeared the one with the Vance Legacy Trust at the very top. Marcus stared at it. The color drained from his face, leaving a sick, gray pallor. No, that is a lie. Vance. That is, Elara. That is correct, Davenport said. And as of this morning, the trust is under the full control of its sole beneficiary, Ms. Vance. Furthermore, as the appointed CEO, you were bound by a specific morality clause in your employment contract. A what? Marcus whispered. A clause you violated in spectacular public fashion at approximately 10:14 last night. A violation that was meticulously documented by Mr. Davies here. He nodded at a terrified Greg, who was still filming. By doing so, you triggered an automatic and immediate transfer of all controlling interests. As of 9:01 this morning, by the authority granted by the Secretary of State, your signatory power, your executive privileges, and your employment were provisionally suspended. Marcus sank into the chair nearest the door. He was breathing heavily. Elara, honey, listen to me. This is a mistake. This is your father's lawyers trying to steal from us, from what we built. You have to stop this. I stood up. The sound of my chair sliding back was unnaturally loud. I slowly walked from the head of the table, my heels clicking on the floor, until I was standing directly in front of him. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a dawning, animal panic. This meeting has 2 items on the agenda. Marcus, I said, my voice low and cold. The first, as Mr. Davenport has so ably explained, is to formally announce my appointment as the new chairwoman of the board. My name is on the title now. I leaned down, just as he had leaned down to me last night. The second, I whispered, is to hold a vote, all in favor of terminating the employment of Marcus Thorne, effective immediately, for cause, with no compensation and no severance. I raised my hand. Davenport raised his. The motion passes, I said. Get out of my chair. Marcus's face contorted, a mask of disbelief and pure rage. You cannot, he roared, slamming his fist on the table. You cannot do this. This company is mine. I built this from nothing. I did not flinch. You built nothing, I said, my voice cutting through his tantrum. You were given a sandbox to play in, and you proceeded to set it on fire. You built it with my father's money. Marcus, and you just got fired. I nodded to the door. Security, I called out, my voice clear and firm. The 2 men entered, the same men who had thrown me out less than 12 hours before. They looked at Marcus, then at me, their faces carefully neutral. They knew where the power now resided. Mr. Thorne's employment has been terminated, I stated. Please escort him from the building. He is allowed to take only his personal effects from his office. Elara, he screamed, as they each took an arm. You will not get away with this. It is my company, mine. It is Ms. Vance, I corrected him, and I already have. I watched them drag him out of the conference room. I listened to his threats and his pathetic pleas echo down the hall. An hour later, Ms. Allen informed me he had been escorted through the main lobby, clutching a single cardboard box, his face a mottled gray. The king, dethroned, walking past the very people he had ruled. The news spread through the office like a shockwave. I sat in my new chair, his chair, and watched the digital fallout on the internal security feeds. Greg was the first to bolt. He had sprinted back to his desk, grabbed his jacket, and was making a fast walk for the elevators. He never made it. A security guard I had stationed on the floor stepped in front of him. Mr. Davies, Ms. Vance would like a word with you. She is in the CEO's office. Jessica was smarter, or so she thought. She had been waiting in Marcus's office, no doubt for her victory hug. I watched her emerge, her face pale, walking quickly, not to the main elevators, but to the service exit. She was almost there when her phone rang. It was Ms. Allen. Ms. Miller. Her crisp voice said over the speakerphone I had active. "Ms. Vance requests you wait in the lobby. Security has been asked to hold you if you attempt to leave the building." The rats were trapped. Greg was brought in first. He looked like he was going to be physically ill. The bravado from last night, the man holding the phone, was gone. In his place was a terrified, hollow shell. "Please sit, Greg," I said, gesturing to the chair opposite the massive desk. He sat, perching on the edge. I slid a single piece of paper across the desk. It was a credit card statement. "The corporate Amex," I said. "You have been busy. Casino charges, online sports betting, $50,000 in just the last 6 months, a travel bonus for a trip you never took." He burst into tears. Actual, sobbing tears. He slid from the chair onto the expensive carpet, literally kneeling. "Please, Alara, Ms. Vance, please, I am so sorry. Marcus, he made me. He said it was part of the perks. I have a problem. I will do anything, anything. Please do not call the police." I looked down at him, my face impassive. "Good," I said, "because I need someone to clean up this mess. I need someone who knows where all of Marcus's digital bodies are buried. You will report to the warehouse. You will be in charge of a full inventory, and you will work there until every cent of this $50,000 is repaid to the company, with interest." "The warehouse," he stammered, his face ashen. "That, or I call the police. Your choice." "No, the warehouse is fine. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Vance." He scrambled to his feet, wiping his face on his sleeve. "Do not thank me. Greg, you are not forgiven. You are on a leash." He fled. Then, I had Jessica brought in. She entered not with tears, but with a defensive, brittle anger. "You cannot keep me here, Alara," she snapped. "This is kidnapping." "Sit down, Jessica," I said. She remained standing. "Fine. Your penthouse," I said, tapping my keyboard. 2.2 million. The wire transfer left the Apex Reserve account 3 months ago, filed under Market Expansion Consulting. A strange title, since you have no consulting experience. And the car? A lovely convertible. Also paid for by the company. I leaned forward. "This is not a divorce, Jessica. This is a criminal investigation. Those assets were purchased with embezzled funds, stolen funds. So, you have 2 choices." I held up one finger. 1. You sign this affidavit, you return the keys to the condo and the car immediately, and you agree to face my civil lawsuit for the recovery of all other assets. I held up a second finger. 2. I pick up this phone. I call the Austin Police Department, and I hand them this file, and you will be charged with felony conspiracy to commit fraud. Marcus will be in prison. Jessica, do you really think he will be waiting for you when you get out?" Her face crumpled. She saw it all. Marcus had not made her his partner. He had made her his accomplice. She had no loyalty to him. She had loyalty only to herself. He told me it was a gift," she whispered, her eyes wide with panic. He said the investors were happy with him, that it was a bonus." I did not know. "A pity," I said, sliding the affidavit across the desk. "But you can save yourself. Tell me everything. Tell me every account, every secret, everything he told you. Start talking." And she did. She sang. Taking control of Apex Innovations felt less like a victory and more like taking the wheel of a speeding car seconds before it hit a wall. Marcus had treated me like a decorative, fragile object, a homemaker. He had forgotten, or perhaps never known, that my father had made me read venture capital reports for fun since I was 16. Marcus saw a wife. He never saw the apprentice. My first order was a full forensic audit of the entire company, spanning the last 5 years. I unleashed Davenport's team, and what they found was worse than I could have imagined. It was not just the embezzlement, the condo for Jessica, the car for Greg, the lavish, undocumented business trips to ski resorts and private islands. that was just the surface. The real rot was in the foundation. Marcus was not a visionary. He was a salesman who had gotten lucky. He had overspent on marketing, neglected research and development, and pushed out the few talented engineers who questioned his decisions. Apex Innovations was a hollow shell, burning through my father's money with a terrifying speed. The company was not just struggling, it was on the brink of catastrophic failure. We were perhaps 6 months from insolvency. And that multi-million-dollar contract, the one that was the entire reason for last night's party, it was, as Davenport had hinted, a trap. It was a poison pill. The terms were impossible. The penalties for failure to deliver were astronomical, and it was designed by my father's team to be the final, fatal blow. Marcus, in his arrogance, had signed it without even reading the fine print, eager to announce his win. I called a company-wide all-hands meeting that afternoon. The atmosphere in the atrium was electric with fear and gossip. I stood on the mezzanine, looking down at the dozens of employees, the guilty, the complicit, and the innocent. "Good afternoon," I began. My voice, amplified by the microphone, was steady and cold. "My name is Alara Vance. As of 9 o'clock this morning, I am the new chairwoman and acting CEO of this company." A terrified silence. "Apex Innovations has been profoundly mismanaged," I continued. "There has been rampant theft, gross negligence, and a culture of cronyism that ends today. There will be significant changes." I did not waste time. I announced the full audit. I announced the immediate dismissal of 3 vice presidents and 2 department heads Marcus's inner circle, the ones who had enabled his theft. I watched their faces turn white. "Security will escort you from the building. Your services are no longer required." Then, I did something else. I have also read the personnel files, and I have seen the performance reviews of those who were consistently overlooked. Effective immediately. I am promoting Sarah Jenkins to head of product development. A gasp from the back. Sarah, a brilliant engineer Marcus had sidelined for being too abrasive, looked up, her face a mask of shock. "And I am promoting David Wilson to Chief Financial Officer, pending the results of the audit. His team will be the one conducting it." David was a quiet controller Marcus had openly mocked in meetings. The message was clear. The old guard was out. The real talent was in. While I was cleaning house, Marcus was finding out what nothing truly meant. He tried to check into a hotel. His corporate Amex was declined. He tried to use his personal visa. Declined. He tried to call his banker. He was informed, in a very polite, sterile voice, that his accounts were locked. He had been living in a high-rise apartment owned by the company as a corporate residence. By noon, security had deactivated his key fob. He was, quite literally, homeless. He did the only thing he could. He called his friends. He called the men who had laughed with him last night, the ones who had clapped him on the back. One by one, they hung up on him. The word was out. Alara Vance was in charge, and the blood was in the water. No one wanted to be associated with the man she was hunting. The social circle that had been his echo chamber of arrogance vanished in a single afternoon. The final blow came not from me, but from a bank. Late in the day, desperate and using a pay-as-you-go phone, he managed to get a junior associate at his bank on the line. He demanded to know why his personal money was frozen. "One moment. Mr. Thorne," the associate said. Yes. It appears we received a court order this morning. Sir, a pretrial attachment lien. All assets are frozen pending a civil case." What civil case?" he yelled into the phone. "It was filed by the Vance Legacy Trust, sir." The associate read, "The claim is for 5 years of damages related to, good heavens, financial malfeasance, breach of fiduciary duty, and corporate embezzlement. They have frozen everything." He had no money. Not even for a lawyer. He was, as I had been just the night before, completely and totally alone. 2 weeks later, I threw a party. I booked the same restaurant, the same private rooftop ballroom in the same glass tower where Marcus had held his. I invited every employee of Apex Innovations, all of our real business partners, and, for the first time, I invited the actual trustees and asset managers from my father's trust, the real investors. The atmosphere this time was not one of forced, brittle celebration. It was one of intense, nervous curiosity. They had all heard the rumors. They had seen the executive heads roll. They had seen the man who was their CEO one day, dragged out in a box the next. Now, they were waiting to see the woman who had replaced him. I made them wait. I arrived last. When I walked in, the room did not just quiet down, it went utterly silent. I was not the woman who had been dragged out of this very room in a ruined silk dress. I was wearing a sharp, midnight blue dress that was all business, my short hair framing a face that was, as one person later told me, terrifyingly calm. I was not a victim. I was Chairwoman Ilara Vance. I walked to the podium, the same one Marcus had stood at. I looked out at the crowd. "Thank you for coming," I said, my voice carrying across the silent room. "I know there has been a great deal of uncertainty in the last 14 days. I will not waste your time with platitudes. You deserve the truth." I laid it out. I told them about the audit. I told them the company had been mismanaged, that it was on the brink of failure. I saw the panic in their eyes. That, I said, was the company under Marcus Thorne. I then laid out the new plan, the restructuring, the new focus on research and development, the promotions of Sarah and David, who were standing beside me. I announced we had secured a new, massive line of credit from our parent company, the Vance Legacy Trust. As for the multi-million-dollar contract, I continued, the one we were meant to be celebrating 2 weeks ago, I have spent the last week renegotiating it. Davenport, standing to the side, handed me a pen. "This morning," I said, "we signed a new, legitimate version of that contract, one that is profitable, one that is achievable, one that will secure our future, not destroy it." I held up the signed document. "Apex Innovations is saved. The work starts Monday, but tonight, we celebrate." The room did not just applaud, it erupted. It was a roar of relief, of genuine excitement. People were raising their glasses to me, coming up to shake my hand. The very investors Marcus had tried to impress were now congratulating me on my decisive action. It was in the middle of this, as I was speaking to our new head of engineering, that I felt a cold draft from the door. The laughter in the room faltered, a commotion, and then his voice. "Ilara." Marcus was pushing his way through the crowd. He was not the man from 2 weeks ago. His suit was wrinkled, as if he had slept in it. He was unshaven, his eyes bloodshot, and he reeked of cheap whiskey. He was a ghost at the feast. He stumbled into the center of the room, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Ilara, you cannot do this, you bitch. You cannot just steal my company." The room was frozen. Security was moving in, but I held up a hand, stopping them. I looked at him, not with hatred or anger or even pity. I looked at him like he was a line item I had to clear. "Your company?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "You never had a company. Marcus, you had an allowance." "And you abused it." "It is mine, I built it," he screamed, lunging toward me. Security grabbed him, one man on each arm, just as they had done to me. But this time, they were my security. "Get him out of here," I ordered. They began to drag him, fighting and cursing, toward the service elevator. He was still screaming, "It's mine, it's mine." As they reached the door, I called out, "Oh, and Marcus." He stopped fighting, turning to look at me, his face a mask of desperate, pathetic hatred. "You still owe the restaurant for your last party," I said, my voice clear in the silence. "The corporate card you used was declined. Naturally, it was quite a large bill." I turned to the restaurant manager, who was watching from the corner, his face pale. "Please send that final outstanding invoice to my lawyers," I instructed. We will be more than happy to deduct it from the millions he already owes the trust. They dragged him out. The door shut, and the silence he left behind was absolute. The bleeding stopped. Over the next month, we didn't just stabilize the company, we rebuilt it. The first order of business was to strip the rot from the name. Apex Innovations was a monument to Marcus's ego. I changed it. The new sign on the building, the new letterhead, the new digital footprint, all read Vance Legacy Tech. It was a promise, and it was a reminder. We were lean, we were focused, and under Sarah's and David's leadership, we were actually innovating. The fear in the building had been replaced by a frantic, focused energy. The people who remained were the ones who deserved to be there, and they were working with the zeal of a team given a second chance. I was in my office, which no longer resembled Marcus's sterile bachelor pad, but was now a functional, warm command center when an internal message came through. It was from Greg. He was still, as I saw from his employee file, working in the warehouse, scanning inventory. His message was short. Ms. Vance, I have information. Information you need. Can I please meet you? Not here. Somewhere else. Please. I arranged to meet him at a small, anonymous coffee shop far from downtown. The man who walked in was not the man from the party or the man who had knelt in my office. The arrogant swagger was gone. He was thin, pale, and looked exhausted. The manual labor, combined with the crushing weight of his debt and his fall from grace, had weathered him. He was hunched over, holding a coffee cup with two shaking hands. "Thank you for coming," he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. "You said you had information." "Greg," I said, my voice flat. I was not there to be his friend. Yes, I had to tell you," he stammered. "I could not. I keep thinking about that night, about everything, and I need you to know what he was really doing." "I know what he was doing. Greg, he was stealing." "No," he said, finally looking up. His eyes were haunted. "It was worse. You found the theft, but you did not find the plan, the whole thing, the party. It was all planned, for months." I sat back, my coffee untouched. "Go on." He was going to do it anyway, even if you had not found out. That night, after he signed that big contract, that was his finish line. He told me everything. The plan was to sign the contract, get the first massive payout, and then divorce you, publicly. He wanted you humiliated so you would be too broken to fight back. "And then," I asked, my voice dangerously soft. "And then he was going to take that money, all of it, and use it to buy out his investors. That is what he told me. He said, 'I am sick of those secret Dubai guys. I am going to make them an offer they cannot refuse and get them out. I want it all in my name.' He had no idea. He had no idea it was you. Or your father. He was planning to use your own money to buy you out, after he had just destroyed you." He let out a short, bitter laugh. He always said you were too nice. Ilara, too trusting. He said, 'Her trust is her greatest weakness. She believes in people, and that is why she will lose.' He saw it as a flaw to be exploited." I looked at him, the full, grotesque architecture of my husband's betrayal finally laid bare. "It was not a weakness, Greg," I said, the words cold and precise. "It was a test, and he walked right into it. He did not see a weakness, he saw a mirror, and he was too arrogant to realize he was the only one setting a trap." We sat in silence for a moment. Greg stared into his cup. "You know, I have to ask," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Why me? Why not just destroy me? You could have sent me to jail with that 50,000. You could have ruined me completely. Why did you not?" I leaned forward. "My father had a philosophy," I said. "He believed in second chances. He always said everyone deserves one shot at redemption." A flicker of hope lit Greg's eyes. But, I continued, he only believed in one. His face fell. You are not forgiven, Greg. You are repaying a debt. You will continue to work in that warehouse, and you will scan every single box until your salary, minus your living expenses, has paid back every cent you stole. And while you are there, you will be my eyes and ears. You will report to me, and only to me. You will tell me about anyone who still talks about Marcus. You will tell me about anyone who is not loyal to Vance Legacy Tech. You will be my ghost, just as I was once my husband's. The hope in his eyes died, replaced by a cold, dawning understanding. He was not free. He had not been saved. He had merely been repurposed. You are not being redeemed, Greg. I finished, placing a few dollars on the table for my coffee. You are being controlled. I stood up and left him there, a man in a new kind of prison. The fall was total. Marcus was not just broke, he was a pariah. The civil suits I had filed were just the beginning. The audit had uncovered enough evidence of wire fraud and embezzlement that the district attorney's office had taken a very keen interest. The state of Texas was indicting him on multiple felony charges. He was in a world he could not charm his way out of. He had no money, no assets, and no friends. The court had appointed him a public defender, a tired, overworked man who had looked at the mountain of evidence and given Marcus the only advice he could take a plea, because he was certainly going to prison. In his final desperate act, a true Hail Mary of a coward, he wrote me a letter. He sent it not to the office, but to the penthouse, a letter scrawled on notebook paper from a homeless shelter. It was pathetic. He did not apologize. He did not confess. Instead, he begged. He pleaded for mercy. He wrote, in a shaky hand I barely recognized, "Think of our 10 good years, Ilara. Do not let them do this to me. You are the only one who can save me." He had given me nothing for 10 years but a performance. He was still performing. I let him wait for 1 week. He was in a halfway house, a temporary address given to him by his public defender when the certified envelope arrived. It was crisp, expensive feeling, with the new, sharp Vance Legacy Tech logo in the corner. He told his lawyer later that he thought it was a deal. He thought, with a pathetic flicker of his old arrogance, that I had finally come to my senses, that I was offering him a settlement, a way out. He thought my softness, my trust, had finally won out. He ripped it open, his hands shaking with a desperate, greedy hope. The first thing he pulled out was a single folded document. It was not a settlement. It was the last page of our divorce papers, finalized by a judge. And at the bottom, in clear, unforgiving ink, was my signature. It was done. He crumpled, but there was something else in the envelope, a check. He unfolded it. He stared, confused. He must have thought it was a mistake. The check was made out to Marcus Thorne. The amount, written out in full, was $100. Tucked into the fold of the check was a small, pearl-white note card, the same kind I used in my new office. My handwriting was clear and steady. It said, "Marcus, this is your severance for 10 years of service, $10 a year. I think it is a fair price for your performance as a husband. Good luck with your lawyer." He just stared at it. That, he would later tell the court-appointed psychiatrist, was the moment he truly broke. Not the loss of the company, not the loss of his friends, but the check, the final calculation, the $100 valuation of a decade of his life. It was a final, perfect, psychological humiliation, far colder and more brutal than any prison sentence. I was in my office, the one that had been his, when I signed that check. I did not do it with anger. I did it with the same calm I used to approve a quarterly budget. It was just a final, necessary expense. I stood and walked to the window, looking out over the Austin skyline, the city my father had loved. He had given me a test, and he had given Marcus a test. I had passed. He had failed. My name was not just on a business license anymore. It was not just on the side of a building. My name was the legacy. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I am so curious to know where you are all listening from around the world. Please, comment below, tell me where you are, and share your thoughts on this. Subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and if you want to support this channel and help this story be heard, please hit that hype button.